Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deandra Murphy, and you are very welcome to our first webinar of 2015, Lane 4's approach to setting goals. During today's webinar, we will learn about a practical framework for setting goals, the different types of goals and how they fit together, and how aligning a team or group behind a meaningful goal can build engagement. As my colleague Isaac mentioned, you should see on your screens a chat box where we'd love you to ask any questions that you might have, and we'll spend some time answering them towards the end of the webinar. So we are joined today by Lane 4 Client Director and Elite Performer, who I'm delighted to introduce to you, the wonderful Mark Richardson. Hi, Mark.
Hello, good afternoon.
So for those of you who don't know, Mark has been at Lane 4 for almost 7 years, and his current role as Client Director involves ensuring our customers have a wonderful experience and managing organic growth across our portfolio of clients. So Mark's background is that of an elite performer. His sport was athletics, and he competed for Great Britain in the 1996 Summer Olympics held in Atlanta, where he won a silver medal with his teammates, setting a UK record in the process. Also, a fun fact I discovered while doing my research ahead of today, Mark is one of the very few athletes ever to beat Michael Johnson over 400 metres. So, I know that many of you will be familiar with Lane 4, but for those of you who might be new to us, I thought it might be useful to give you a snapshot of our heritage and the work that we do. So the reason we are called Lane 4 is because Lane 4's Managing Director, Adrian Moorhouse, clenched his Olympic gold at the 1998 Seoul Olympics in lane number 4, which is traditionally set aside for the fastest heat winner, which gave him a small but potentially crucial advantage over his competitors. So since launching in 1995, Lane 4 has become a leader in the field of organisational development, internal comms and engagement, with people coming from the 3 interlocking areas you can see in front of you of psychology, elite performance and the commercial world. So interestingly, one of our people coming from the top box that you can see there, psychology, is one of our resident performance psychologists, Charlie Unwin, who recently worked with Lizzie Arnold, helping her to become Olympic champion at the Sochi Games in 2014. And for those of you who may be interested, he'll be presenting our next webinar on the 3rd of March on resilience. So you'll also have in front of you Lane 4 in numbers. You may have noticed that 2015 is our 20th birthday, which we are very excited about. You'll also notice some other facts and figures, and one is that we have 3 full-time researchers. And it may not be commonly known that we have a dedicated research and product team who ensure that all of what you see and hear in our delivery is underpinned by the most up-to-date and rigorous research. So I will now hand over to the lovely Mark Richardson, who'll be presenting his and Lane 4's approach to goal setting.
Deandra, thank you so much. And I've got to say, I'm really passionate about the topic for this afternoon's webinar, as goal setting has been a tool that I've utilised as an elite performer, and it has actually become a cornerstone of my leadership, consulting and coaching practice. So before I bring to life some of the methodology that I perhaps have used across my time, and what I'm going to do is just refresh your memories with regards to the agenda. So as Deandra shared, we're going to be introducing a very practical framework for setting goals, and the great thing about this framework is it lands fantastically well into an organisational context. We're also going to be giving you further clarity on the different types of goals that you can set and how they can align together to really be able to, create the long-lasting behaviours that you're looking to establish. And then the third piece is going to be how you can go about aligning a team or a group behind a really meaningful goal, which is really going to help to drive and build increased levels of engagement. So before we get into that, I'm just really curious. It's the start of a brand new year, 2015. My mind can't help but wonder what 2015 has in store for all of us. I'm also curious as to how many of us might have set some type of New Year's resolution. And I've got to say, I'm not a fan of making New Year's resolutions. And in fact, I've made a firm commitment not to make any more because I found they just haven't worked for me. And I'm going to loop back to that in a few moments' time just to explain why. But I was having a conversation with an old training partner of mine who now owns a couple of gyms, and he shared that how at this point of time in the year, he always experiences a huge influx of new members. And in fact, the British Military Fitness Organisation did a piece of research, and they established that over 2/3 of Britons started the new year with the greatest of intentions of getting fit. So kind of a new year and a new year, a new you. And interestingly, there's also another piece of research that shows that by the end of January, over 1/3 of people who have committed to a gym membership have actually cancelled it or have failed to commit with purpose to that resolution or good intention. So for me, the reason why I'm, disillusioned with New Year's resolutions is because there's a gap or a miss in not finding a strong enough personal motivation or reason why to keep that as a long-lasting behaviour. So for me, this highlights how setting the right type of goal, one that is aspirational, that has personal meaning, and that commands your thoughts, liberates your energy, and inspires you on a day-to-day basis, how that type of goal will drive the right type of behaviours which will make a long-lasting commitment. So what I'm going to get into now is just start sharing, our thinking, and just give you an overview of our goal-setting framework. So this is the hierarchical goal-setting framework, and this is a simplistic framework. However, it's not simplistic in its application. It's a really versatile tool that you can use at an individual level for setting personal goals. You can use it when interacting with a team or crafting team goals, or actually you can use it for a business function or for an entire organisation, so it has great adaptability. Now, if we start to look at the top end of the goal-setting framework, as you can see on the slide, it talks to your vision, your story, your goal. And I think this is absolutely crucial. It's really crucial that for any use, whether at individual, team or an organisational level, that there's a strong level of personal meaning or meaning and engagement that's created and crafted. So leaders, it's absolutely fundamental for them to create meaning and also to create the conditions for intrinsic motivation to be really well nourished. And I guess what we're not talking about here is just a well wordsmithed vision statement. It needs to be more than that, because you need to bring it to life for yourself with your own personal narrative, or for others who you might be leading. So it's something about what is the really engaging story, the narrative that's going to help people to align behind that goal, be inspired by that goal, and actually, more importantly, identify with it and draw on it as a motivational force when they really need to. So that's the first piece. So if you chunk down from that, the next layer that you'll see is the outcome goal level. So this is what you might wish for, or what the core objective is that you're trying to achieve. So once you've got clarity on the direction of travel, I guess you need to start thinking about, well, what are the things that are going to make a fundamental difference to that? And so what are the core outcome goals that you really need to align yourself to that will give you the best possible chance of being able to realise that personal vision? So those are your outcome goals. So that an outcome goal needs to be around the objective or the outcome that you're looking to achieve from any given situation. And I guess our counsel would be that we all have a finite amount of focus and a finite amount of time. So there's something about not wanting to capitalise and realise too many outcome goals, because the chances are that you won't be setting yourself up for success. So it's thinking about what are the big rocks, the things that are going to make a fundamental difference. So once you've mapped those 1, 2 or 3 perhaps outcome goals out, you chunk down and start thinking about your performance goals. And your performance goals are, I guess, your key indicators, your key measures. What does great performance look like in any given context? And I guess any goal at this level should be absolutely specific. It should be absolutely measurable. And our experience is that organisations are very good at setting goals at this level. And then once you've mapped out those performance goals, that's what great performance looks like, you then chunk down and start thinking about your process goals. And your process goals are the how. So all the mini interventions, the day-by-day interventions that you need to put in place, or whatever the relevant time frame is, that will give you the foundation for success. So that's how you'll execute that great performance. So process goals are the how, performance goals are the what, The outcome goal is a core objectives that you're looking to achieve, and your vision is the personal why story. At the uppermost end of the framework, that's where motivation is really peaked and harnessed. And I guess the further you go down the goal-setting framework, that's where you have a greater amount of control. So what I thought might be useful is just to bring to life how I use the goal-setting framework as a personal tool when I was getting ready for my Olympic campaign for the 1996 Atlanta Games. So the image that you can see now is of the beautiful island of Anguilla, and there's a specific reason for that. So when I was a young boy, my parents actually hailed from the Caribbean island of Anguilla. So it's only 36 square miles in area size. It has a population of just over 15,000 people, and it's the most northerly of the Leeward Islands and the Lesser Antilles, lying just east of Puerto Rico. Wonderful island, boasts 33 beaches. It's just heaven on earth. It's fantastic. And when I was growing up, my parents shared with me that I could be the first person of Anguillian descendancy to win an Olympic medal. Now actually that became really, really important and meaningful to me, because not only would it be helping to create a legacy, I guess, for my family name, but also a bit of a legacy for the island that my parents came from. So I guess that was the personal vision that I attached to my ambitions of wanting to I guess align and become associated with the Olympic sport in the first instance. I guess the second piece was I first connected with the Olympic movement back in 1984, watching the Los Angeles Olympics, and it was the most inspiring thing that I'd ever seen. And for me, there was one athlete who really did emerge as, I guess, almost stealing the centre stage of that Olympic Games, the great Carl Lewis. And I guess like all fantastic champions, he had the ability to make what he did just look absolutely effortless. And he won 4 golds. It was absolutely majestic. A gold in the 100, the 200, the long jump, and the 4x100 metre relay. And from that moment onwards, it crystallised in my mind how important it was to me as a personal ambition to get onto the podium and win an Olympic medal for myself. So the next slide that you're going to see now is, I guess, my plan on a page in terms of how I went about my preparation for getting ready for the challenge of the Olympic Games, the Atlanta Games. So I've spoken to you and shared my personal vision, so that's kind of at the uppermost, and it's not actually represented in the slide that you can see. So the key outcome goal that I was looking to achieve was to get onto the podium at those Atlanta Games, so to win an Olympic medal for myself. So that was the outcome goal. So what my coach and I did, we kind of, I guess we extrapolated what would be required for me to earn my right to be on that team, and also the kind of performance that I need to put in to give me the best possible chance of realising that outcome goal. So we concluded that I'd have to run a time of 44.6 seconds for the 400 metres. And actually, we wanted to be much more specific around and start to think about what were some of the core components that would, and the core attributes that would help a performer to be able to realise that goal. So we came up with some specific measures chunked down to speed, strength and speed endurance, and we set some really stringent performance criteria in each of those under each of those performance goals. So for speed, I wanted to be able to run the 100 metres in 10.3 seconds. Strength, 2 lifts that we identified, both Olympic lifts. One, the clean, where you lift the barbell out from a static position from the floor, and then bench press, where you're literally lying prone on a bench and looking to raise sizable amounts of weight. Now the challenge was, with all of those performance criteria that we set ourselves, was that I'd never performed at that level before. I'd never got close to running 10.3 seconds, for example, for the 100 metres. That was a personal best performance. The notion of running a speed endurance session, so 3x300 metres off a short recovery, 15 minutes in time of 33 seconds flat. I just never had performed at that level before. And that's where your process goals come into play. So how do you set yourself up for success to be able to realise these aspirational goals that get more and more challenging as you work your way up the framework. So the process goals for me, there was something about actually breaking the running action into all its constituent parts. So practicing really in a stringent way, very rigorously, all the drills and skills that would embed technical excellence, and literally doing hundreds of repetitions to embed that excellence. Being really mindful of my diet. So as an athlete, you've got to be conscious of that because you're an athlete 24/7. So making sure that I was taking on board the right fuel sources in the form of complex carbohydrates, but also making sure that there was a good amount of nutrients as well to protect my immune system. Making sure that I got adequate amount of sleep. So something that seems so simple, but some of those sessions were really challenging, and it'll take you to a really taxing place. And there's something about being really resourceful, and I guess having a full energy reservoir before you step into those sessions. And in the early parts of my career, I suffered a vast amount of injuries, actually. So there was something about how could I minimise lost training days. So there's something about prehabilitation work, and that's where the sports massage and also the physiotherapy came in. So actually planning those as a proactive measure into my diary. So those were some of the process goals that I put into place, and I'm really delighted. So as Deandra shared earlier, it kind of all worked out. So the relay team, of course you can see a picture of us on the podium there. We set a European record. I ran the quickest split ever recorded by a British athlete of 43.6 seconds. And most importantly, we realised that collective dream and vision of winning an Olympic medal, which was something that I guess I will treasure for the rest of my days. So just now, I guess what I'm going to help bring to life is how you can map these back into an organisational context. And the first piece, I just wanted to share a little bit of thinking that came from David Brailsford, who was the performance director of the track cycling team in London 2012 and also the Beijing Olympics as well. And so in London 2012, the Great Britain track cycling team, they won 7 out of 10 gold medals in the track cycling programme. And David Brailsford, he was the architect who came up with the philosophy of the accumulative assimilation of marginal gains. And so this principle came from him challenging all members of his team to think of everything that they could that was involved in riding a bike. And then he challenged the team to think about, well, how can you improve each of those sub-elements by 1%? Now, if you could do that, if you could break it down to that level and improve each element by 1%, what you will get is a significant increase when you put all those factors back together. And for me, that's what process goals give you. It's thinking about 100 things that you can do 1% better and really embracing that, I guess, lens and mindset of process improvement and realising that better never stops. And that's how you can really gain control in any environment, in any context, in any organisation, thinking about how you can really refine and sharpen your process goals. I guess the other piece that I just wanted to bring to life was how in any organisation, really helping people to identify and connect with a vision can really give a performance multiplying effect. And for me, it reminds me of this organisation called Vespa, who set a goal at the wrong level. They set a very clear performance goal. So the goal that they had in mind was they wanted to prevent the number of recalls and defaults that went off the factory line. So Vespa, they're an Italian organisation, and they make the Vespa mopeds. And I guess the person who was in charge of the production unit, who had this aspiration of closing the gap and minimising the amount of faults and recalls that went off the factory line, it kind of was reflecting, it didn't matter how loudly they communicated their performance goals, it wasn't gaining traction, and people weren't adopting the behaviours which would address those performance deficits. And whilst that person was having a family meal, they suddenly had a moment of real insight and clarity, and they realised that they were communicating the wrong type of goal. because that individual realised at that point in time the thing that was of most importance to him was the safety and nurturing of his family. And indeed, he had 2 teenage boys, which were the key market that Vespa were trying to sell their mopeds to. So he realised that he had to communicate the goal in a very different way. And so what this person did, they created a poster campaign and put it all across the manufacturing unit. And this poster said, quite simply, someone's child will ride the bike that you make today. Someone's child will ride the bike that you make today. And it had a huge transformational effect on people's behaviours, because suddenly they could identify with what the organisation were trying to achieve. They could identify, and I guess they started to assume personal accountability in terms of what they needed to take ownership of and what their role was in terms of helping to create those mopeds. So, a couple of questions that I'd just like to leave you with, just based on, I guess, what you've heard so far, and having seen the goal-setting framework. I know for many of you, you'll have a vast amount of experience and be able to set goals to great effect. And I guess this is about just sharpening and perhaps reflecting on and refreshing and reinforcing some good practice that's already out there. So, I'm curious, based on what you've heard so far, what is it, or how can you sharpen the goals that you're currently working towards? I'm also really curious as to how well formed the vision is for the team or function that you might be leading, or actually how well formed your personal vision is in terms of some of the goals that you might be going after for yourselves. So in terms of goal setting and how it links to some of our key product areas, so for us, goal setting, it's absolutely fundamental and very much part of any performance management conversation. So aligning people to goals and I guess supporting them and challenging them on that journey is something that's vital. It's a fundamental part of leadership transition, so thinking about people who make that transition from being an individual contributor through to team leader, through to a strategic leader. Well, what are the things that are most important and what are the goals that they might need to set as they make those transitions? It's fundamental to team development, to personal resilience. It's an essential pillar and a core competency with regards to performance coaching, and it's an essential part of collaborating and really being able to collaborate to the highest degree as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And thank you everyone for your questions and your comments. I really hope you found that as engaging as I did. We did want to let you know that we'll be sending around an email with a link to a very short survey just to get your feedback on the session. We'd really appreciate if you could fill it out. It only takes 2 minutes and it will help us to improve our future sessions, which we hope you'll tune into. So now we will look at some of the questions that you've sent in, and do keep them coming. So the first one we have for you, Mark, is so how can I bring this to life for the team that I lead?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I've noticed in my leadership and coaching practice actually is the disconnect with leaders starting to think about what is the narrative, what's the story that they need to shape and craft and refine to get people really engaged in the direction of travel that they're starting to pursue. So actually I think there's something about spending dedicated time, focus and energy, just starting to map that out. And there's something about, once you've got the first cut of that, there's something about engaging the team in it, so co-creating it, bouncing ideas, getting the buy-in of the team, helping them to feel as if they're starting to shape it, is something that can be really, really useful and significant, because that helping individuals to be part of the process, it naturally fires their motivation and they get genuinely interested in things that you're trying to achieve. So I think there's something about really dedicating that time, thinking about that future focus and starting to think about, well, what's your purpose? What is the thing that you've been commissioned as a team to go out and deliver? And how can you really make that engaging and exciting for the team? So what is it that people will start to identify with to start to nourish that intrinsic motivation across the team?
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Mark. And the next question we have is, how could you implement this for a virtual team?
Yeah, and I think actually those two questions are probably aligned. So with the leaders that I've worked with who've got the challenge of leading teams that are dispersed over vast geographies, they're having to connect with them for the most part in a virtual way, through telephone conferences, through WebExes, etc. It's really important that people are clear on what their individual roles and responsibilities are. I think that's fundamental. You also need to understand how their part of the jigsaw fits into the greater whole. So again, giving people a really firm understanding on what is the key outcome goals that the team's working towards, and actually what's the direction of travel. What will it mean if we're all able to deliver and perhaps surpass those outcome goals? How is it going to help us to realise that vision that we're working towards?
Okay, brilliant. I think that's something that a lot of our clients, ask us about, so hopefully that resonates with quite a few of you. So our next question is, how can you keep morale up if you don't meet your goals?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So for me, it's where you focus your attention. So as an elite performer, I guess the things that you've got most control over the process goals. So what I used to do before any major competition, of course, I had some higher order goals, and it was really desperately important for me to win an Olympic medal. But actually the thing that I almost measured myself against was how well I was able to execute my process goals. Because if you're able to execute those really well, if you're able to do the very best job that you can with regards to your performance goals and kind of aggressively hunting those down, what that gives you an opportunity to do, it gives you a chance or gets you into a competitive state. Now the outcome it can be beyond you, because you're up against competitors. It's a competitive landscape, so you might be able to put a personal best performance. Actually on the day, it's not good enough, you don't get the outcome goal that you require. So when I'm leading a team, thinking about, I guess, winning pieces of work with new partners, for me, I like to review team performance on how well have we matched up against the process goals that we set out to achieve. Because the outcome is not always within our gift, but if you can get the process goals absolutely right, if you can get some of those key performance indicators right, it gives you an opportunity to win. And what you want to do is give yourself more opportunities than not of being able to come out with the outcome that you want.
Right, okay, thank you. We have another question in, which is asking, if you look at your goals, Mark,
yes,
you were committed to each performance goal, and were you committed to each performance goal in equal measure, or did some take priority? For example, visualization versus strength training. How does this relate to us as business leaders?
Yeah, it's a good, really interesting question. So I think there's something about almost, I guess as an athlete, what I did was almost a personal performance profiling exercise. So there's something about establishing the goals, and there's something about understanding, well, what's the performance gap and what did I need to do to kind of minimise that. And that's how we came up with the whole structure of my training regime. So there's something about actually doing that performance profiling exercise, and actually the points that have been raised there. The visualization piece was a process goal. So for me, there was something about not being overawed when I got into that Olympic environment. So there was something about almost having that mental dress rehearsal and just thinking about what it might feel like being in that environment, so that I could come up with appropriate coping strategies so that I wouldn't be overawed by the whole experience. The strength training was a specific performance target, and so it was really easy to work backwards. And I guess we used to work in training cycles, and so we would go through an intensive 6-week cycle, and then we'd test ourselves at the end of that. And I guess what any leader or team manager needs to do is almost keep a bit of a balanced scorecard and keep those conversations live to track how people are performing against those goals. So where are we? And you might want to employ a traffic light system, red, amber, green, which is a great way of just focusing where you might need to have increased focus or attention or more deliberate practice to help you close the gaps in some of those goals.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be, as I said, sending some follow-up communication, so do look out for that, and that will have details of how you can register for our next webinar. So we hope you tune in and enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you.